Welcome to Iron Sharpens Iron. My name is Jeremy Nettles. I am the evangelist for the River Ridge Church of Christ that meets in Newburgh, Indiana. If you'd like to stop by and visit us, you can find us at 5600 Van Road at 10 a.m. for Sunday morning worship. You can also get here an hour early and be a part of our Bible study at 9. And we also have an afternoon worship period at 4 on every Sunday. We gather in the middle of the week at 7 p.m. on Wednesdays for another Bible study, and for those studies we have classes for all ages, and we'd love to have you come and participate. You're also welcome to get in touch with us by phone at 812-550-6234 or email info@riverridgechurch.org. The words of the preacher, the son of David, king in Jerusalem. Vanity of vanities, says the preacher. Vanity of vanities, all is vanity. What does man gain by all the toil at which he toils under the sun? A generation goes and a generation comes, but the earth remains forever. The sun rises and the sun goes down and hastens to the place where it rises. The wind blows to the south, it goes around to the north. Around and around goes the wind, and on its circuits the wind returns. All streams run to the sea, but the sea is not full. To the place where the streams flow, there they flow again. All things are full of weariness. A man cannot utter it. The eye is not satisfied with seeing, nor the ear filled with hearing. What has been is what will be, and what has been done is what will be done, and there is nothing new under the sun. Is there a thing of which it is said, "See, this is new"? It has been already in the ages before us. There is no remembrance of former things, nor will there be any remembrance of later things yet to be among those who come after. We're going to be studying the book of Ecclesiastes today. Ecclesiastes means preacher, and you might have noticed that in verses 1 and 2 it said the words of the preacher, and Vanity of Vanities says the preacher. The preacher, that's the title of the book. Now, who is this preacher? Well, he said in verse 1, the son of David, king in Jerusalem. This is Solomon, the king renowned for his great wisdom. So when he starts to speak, we should probably perk up and listen. The observation that he has made so far in this book, and in this little poem that begins the book, it's going to be a theme for the book running throughout the whole rest of it. Vanity. All is vanity. He's saying everything is empty. The wind just keeps on blowing, and it never seems to be exhausted, and it's always as if there's another source of more wind to come. The sun goes around and around and around in the sky. Well, from our perspective, the sun goes around in the sky. It keeps on going, and it gets to be kind of tedious, a bore, because it's just always the same thing over and over and over. He says that there's nothing new. Now, there are some things that we have today that Solomon didn't have. For example, this TV show, or TV. But, well, what's he trying to get at? It's not that there is nothing that has never happened exactly in that way, looking exactly like that before. But the basis of it, the core essence of it, is a repetition. What I'm doing today is not so very different from what Solomon was doing when he wrote this book and left it for us to read. There's an observation along these lines that Mark Twain made, that history doesn't repeat itself exactly so much as it rhymes. So, of course, the world looks a bit different today than it looked in Solomon's time, but, well, the way it looks isn't really that important. The differences that we see are pretty superficial. We all have the same human experience of day and night and sleep cycles and the struggle to stay alive, the struggle to find food and shelter, and the struggle to build something worthwhile and memorable with our lives before we die and go back to the dust. It's so easy for us to look at ourselves today as if we have achieved, we have arrived at the pinnacle of civilization, but, well, that's how people felt at the beginning of the 20th century, and then they proceeded to destroy the earth and kill 100 million people. There's no reason that can't happen again. It's a mistake for us to look at the past and think of back then as a different universe. It's also a mistake when, for instance, kids today look at their lives and they say, well, Dad just doesn't understand what it's like to be a kid today. Yeah, well, I said that when I was a kid, and I'm sure my dad said that when he was a kid, and his dad said that when he was a kid, and it just keeps on going back and back and back. Now, you might say, well, there are some things that exist today that didn't exist when I was a kid or when my parents were kids. The internet was a huge paradigm shift. Okay, fair enough. Then smartphones, not so long after that, were a huge paradigm shift. Social media is itself a paradigm shift, and that predates the smartphone, but it's so much more powerful and destructive today than it was in the early days of MySpace and such. Once upon a time, the automobile was also a paradigm shift, and so was the telephone and the telegraph and the railroad and industrial factories, and it just keeps going back. We have this notion that things are so much different today from the previous generation, but that's been happening for ages. There are superficial differences, but it doesn't really amount to anything. We all face the same life, the same struggle to find food and shelter, and to build something memorable and lasting, and to search for some kind of satisfaction. There's a running theme in Ecclesiastes that all of these efforts are in vain. They're empty. That's the whole point of this book. Let's read verses 12 through 15 of chapter 1. I, the preacher, have been king over Israel in Jerusalem, and I applied my heart to seek and to search out by wisdom all that is done under heaven. It is an unhappy business that God has given to the children of man to be busy with. I have seen everything that is done under the sun, and behold, all is vanity, and a striving after wind. What is crooked cannot be made straight, and what is lacking cannot be counted. We see here the purpose statement for the book. Solomon is laying this out almost like it's a research project. He says, I wanted to figure out life, to understand the business that God has given man to be busy with under the sun. Solomon, known for his wisdom, this wisdom was given to him by God. Surely if anybody can figure out the meaning of life, it's going to be him, right? But he's going to lay out through the rest of the book a whole bunch of his observations, and then he's going to draw conclusions from those things. He's looking to find some kind of lasting satisfaction that will come from understanding the meaning of life and his purpose here on this earth. It's important also that we take note of the scope of his inquiry into the meaning of life. We read this already, but let's take a look again at verse 13. I applied my heart to seek and to search out by wisdom all that is done under heaven. He says elsewhere in the next verse, actually, and several more times throughout the book, under the sun. Keep that in mind. It's going to be important. Let's move on to chapter 2, verse 1. I said in my heart, come now, I will test you with pleasure. Enjoy yourself. But behold, this also was vanity. He didn't find satisfaction even in the attempts to satisfy his flesh. Let's jump down to verse 9. So I became great and surpassed all who were before me in Jerusalem. Also my wisdom remained with me, and whatever my eyes desired I did not keep from them. I kept my heart from no pleasure, for my heart found pleasure in all my toil, and this was my reward for all my toil. Then I considered all that my hands had done, and the toil I had expended in doing it, and behold, all was vanity and a striving after wind, and there was nothing to be gained under the sun. So he started with wisdom, and he didn't find satisfaction in that, so he thought, let's go the other direction and just pursue absolute hedonistic pleasure, and well, he found that didn't satisfy him either. So he thought, maybe I'll find pleasure and satisfaction in working. And so he worked his tail off, and he found that that didn't give him a lasting satisfaction. It seemed to be enjoyable while it lasted, but then it was over, and what was the point? If you had 3 wishes, then what would you wish for? Now, imagine that you got those 3 things. Would you be satisfied? Yeah, most likely not. What happens very often to, jackpot winners in the lottery? They might receive a huge amount of money as a windfall, and it's gone first thing you know. Or even if it's not gone, it doesn't change their lives. It doesn't bring them the happiness that they might have expected would come from this great wealth. And if they're more responsible about it, if they don't spend the money, if they just put it in the bank and then save it up for retirement or something like that, Well, I mean, that's great and all, but they played the lottery because they were hoping to get all this money, and yet here they are still working to make money every day for their living. Seems as if there's not a whole lot of point to this. Let's keep reading, verse 12. So I turned to consider wisdom and madness and folly, for what can the man do who comes after the king? Only what has already been done. Then I saw that there is more gain in wisdom than in folly, as there is more gain in light than in darkness. The wise person has his eyes in his head, but the fool walks in darkness. And yet I perceive that the same event happens to all of them. Even while he is despairing that there's nothing new under the sun, and there's no lasting progress made and no lasting satisfaction from it, he also says there are some things that are better than others. Wisdom is better than folly. I think we would all agree with that, and yet, as he observes at the end of verse 14, the same event happens to them all. What does he mean by that? He's talking about death. Death is the great equalizer. And no matter how wise you are, no matter how foolish you are, no matter how rich or poor, no matter how much pleasure, no matter how ascetic you are in your life, you're all going to end up in the same place. You're all going to end up dead. So what's the point of any of it? Suffering and striving and putting up with all this difficulty when we're all going to end up dead in the end anyway. Verse 18. I hated all my toil, in which I toil under the sun, seeing that I must leave it to the man who will come after me, and who knows whether he will be wise or a fool. Yet he will be master of all for which I toiled and used my wisdom under the sun. This also is vanity. Solomon is saying, I hate that I'm going to leave an inheritance for my son. Now, he's not saying that he hates his son. He's not diminishing the value or the wisdom or anything like that of his son. He's just saying, I don't know. I won't be here. When I die, everything that I worked for is going to be left for somebody else. And maybe he'll be wise, and maybe he'll use it well, but maybe he won't. Maybe he won't. By the way, did you notice that earlier in the chapter he said, verse 10, my heart found pleasure in all my toil, and then he says in verse 18, I hated all my toil. Seems kind of inconsistent. Well, it's because it depends on his perspective. While he was doing it, he found enjoyment in it. But once it was over, he looked back on it and despised it. Because what was the point, really? Verse 24 is his initial conclusion, and he's going to come back to this. There is nothing better for a person than that he should eat and drink and find enjoyment in his toil. This also, I saw, is from the hand of God. For apart from him, who can eat or who can have enjoyment? For to the one who pleases him, God has given wisdom and knowledge and joy. But to the sinner he has given the business of gathering and collecting only to give to one who pleases God. This also is vanity and a striving after wind. When he says that there's nothing better for you than to eat and drink and find enjoyment in your toil, it would be a mistake to say that's the absolute pinnacle. That is, of all of the wonderful things available to you, that would be the best. Because that's not what Solomon is saying. What he's saying is that there's no point in anything. And as pathetic and useless as it is, I have found nothing that's better than just to eat and drink and try to find some enjoyment in the work that you do. That's depressing. Now, he also says in these verses that we should strive to please God and sort of hope for the best, and yet, well, where's it going to lead? You're still going to die. In chapter 3, verse 9, he says, what gain has the worker from his toil? So even though he said there's nothing better than to eat and drink and find enjoyment in your labor, he also reminds us again and again, yeah, but there's really no point in doing all that work. In chapter 3, verse 11, he introduces something important. He, that's God, has made everything beautiful in its time. Also, he has put eternity into man's heart, yet so that he cannot find out what God has done from the beginning to the end. Now, the first part of that verse is important, but we don't really have time to think about that because the second part is mind-blowing. God has put eternity into man's heart. What does that mean? I think what he's getting at here is that each and every one of us has an inkling, even independent of it being told you from previous generations or from, the scriptures or anything like that. We all have this inkling that there's more than this physical life. We have this inkling that there must be a spiritual realm. God has put eternity into our hearts. This is a source of great frustration for Solomon, because he looks at it and he has this intuition that there's more, and yet he can't figure it out. And so he has said, well, the best you can do is serve God, and at least he will bless you in this life, right? And, well, I mean, that's what he said earlier in the end of chapter 2, but here in chapter 3, verse 16, moreover, I saw under the sun that in the place of justice, even there was wickedness, and in the place of righteousness, even there was wickedness. I said in my heart, God will judge the righteous and the wicked, for there is a time for every matter and for every work. I said in my heart with regard to the children of man, that God is testing them, that they may see that they themselves are but beasts. For what happens to the children of man and what happens to the beasts is the same. As one dies, so dies the other. They all have the same breath, and man has no advantage over the beasts, for all is vanity. All go to one place. All are from the dust, and to dust all return. Who knows whether the spirit of man goes upward and the spirit of the beast goes down into the earth? So I saw that there is nothing better than that a man should rejoice in his work, for that is his lot. Who can bring him to see what will be after him? Even though he keeps saying, I said in my heart that God is going to judge the wicked and bless the righteous, he doesn't have any basis for that observation, because he says, in the place of justice I saw wickedness, in the place of righteousness I saw injustice. It doesn't actually work out that way in practice, even though it is implanted in our hearts to expect God to do it. And what happens? We all end up in the same place. Maybe the righteous are vindicated in this life, or maybe they are murdered by the wicked. But the wicked, you might think that they're in a better position, but, well, they're going to die too. They'll all end up in the same place. Again, I saw all the oppressions that are done under the sun, and behold the tears of the oppressed, and they had no one to comfort them. On the side of their oppressors there was power, and there was no one to comfort them. And I thought the dead, who are already dead, more fortunate than the living, who are still alive. But better than both is he who has not yet been, and has not seen the evil deeds that are done under the sun. Solomon sounds almost suicidal here. Better to be dead than alive. He's almost saying, I wish that I had never been born, because I hate to see all the evil that is done under the sun. Verse 4, Then I saw that all toil and all skill in work come from a man's envy of his neighbor. This also is vanity and a striving after wind. He's right, isn't he? All this hard work that we do, and we champion hard work. We say that hard work is a good thing. It's a moral good, and I agree. But what do we do with it? We see that somebody else has the thing, and we think, I want that thing, and then we, if we are morally upright, work hard to get the money in order to acquire the thing. What usually happens? Are we satisfied with the thing? Nope, we just look for the next thing that our neighbor has and try to keep up and get one of those too. Funny thing is, your neighbor's looking at you too and doing the same thing. Chapter 5, verse 10. He who loves money will not be satisfied with money, nor he who loves wealth with his income. This also is vanity. When goods increase, they increase who eat them, and what advantage has their owner but to see them with his eyes? Sweet is the sleep of a laborer, whether he eats little or much, but the full stomach of the rich will not let him sleep. The modern version of this is mo money, mo problems. Solomon said it 3,000 years ago. And again, he's right, isn't he? It is easier in some sense to be a day laborer, living paycheck to paycheck, because you're tired and you sleep well. But the rich, well, they have all sorts of problems that come with being rich. He comes back around to the same old theme in chapter 5, verse 18. Behold, what I have seen to be good and fitting is to eat and drink and find enjoyment in all the toil with which one toils under the sun for the few days of his life that God has given him, for this is his lot. Everyone also to whom God has given wealth and possessions and power to enjoy them, and to accept his lot and rejoice in his toil, this is the gift of God. for he will not much remember the days of his life, because God keeps him occupied with joy in his heart. Notice he said that you're not going to be satisfied with great riches, but essentially what he's getting at here is at least maybe they will distract you from the pointlessness of this life. Even if you got everything that you could ever want for, everything that you wished for in this life, you would immediately begin finding other things to wish for and finding all of the problems, all the reasons for dissatisfaction. It just doesn't work. We all keep striving after this lasting satisfaction, and we never find it. Chapter 8, verse 14. There is a vanity that takes place on earth, that there are righteous people to whom it happens according to the deeds of the wicked, and there are wicked people to whom it happens according to the deeds of the righteous. I said that this also is vanity, and I commend joy, for man has nothing better under the sun, but to eat and drink and be joyful, for this will go with him in his toil through the days of his life that God has given him under the sun. When I applied my heart to know wisdom, and to see the business that is done on earth, how neither day nor night do one's eyes see sleep, then I saw all the work of God, that man cannot find out the work that is done under the sun. However much man may toil in seeking, he will not find it out. Even though a wise man claims to know, he cannot find it out. It's the same old tune. Do you think that you have the answer to the meaning of life under the sun? No, you really don't. It just doesn't work. No matter how hard you work at it, no matter what your claims are, you don't get it. Even Solomon didn't get it. Chapter 9, verse 3. This is an evil in all that is done under the sun, that the same event happens to all. Also the hearts of the children of men are full of evil, and madness is in their hearts while they live, and after that they go to the dead. But he who is joined with all the living has hope, for a living dog is better than a dead lion. For the living know that they will die, but the dead know nothing, and they have no more reward, for the memory of them is forgotten. Their love and their hate and their envy have already perished, and forever they have no more share in all that is done under the sun. What was the purpose of all of this? What is the purpose in life when we're all going to end up dead? And yet, as Solomon observes, those of us who are alive cling to that bizarre, senseless hope that life gives us. We know that death is coming, and yet no one seems to want to meet it. And so based on all of this, Solomon gives us some recommendations in chapter 9, verses 7 through 10. Go, eat your bread with joy, and drink your wine with a merry heart, for God has already approved what you do. Let your garments be always white, let not oil be lacking on your head. Enjoy life with the wife whom you love, all the days of your vain life that he has given you under the sun, because that is your portion in life, and in your toil at which you toil under the sun. Whatever your hand finds to do, do it with your might. For there is no work, or thought, or knowledge, or wisdom in Sheol, to which you are going. After that, there are some assorted useful and wise proverbs in chapters 10 and 11, and then in chapter 12, the first 8 verses are a beautiful metaphor that makes the case that those who are young especially should seek God. We don't have time to go through that on this program, but I encourage you to read Ecclesiastes 12, 1 through 8 once we're done. Instead, I'd like to jump straight to the end of chapter 12 and read verses 13 and 14, which close out the book. The end of the matter. All has been heard. Fear God and keep his commandments, for this is the whole duty of man. For God will bring every deed into judgment, with every secret thing, whether good or evil. Aha! But remember back in chapter 1, verse 13? I applied my heart to seek and to search out by wisdom all that is done under heaven. And then we went through all of his observations throughout the book, and we somehow landed on this as the conclusion? How did he get there? It wasn't from facts and logic. The facts and logic led to the nihilistic you only live once philosophy. And we kind of had to agree that he was onto something there. But also chapter 3, verse 11, he has put eternity into man's heart, yet so that he cannot find out what God has done from the beginning to the end. God has made it so we're not going to be able to fully understand, but he has put eternity into our hearts. He's given us a basic intuition, a moral conscience that cries out for justice and expects that God is going to deliver it. From the perspective of Ecclesiastes, The conclusion was, there's no point in any of this. There's no fleshly reason that I shouldn't just do whatever pleases me here and now, and who cares how that makes others feel. We're left, as Solomon said, we're no better than the animals. And we're all headed for the same place. And the best we can hope for is to find enjoyment in whatever our hand finds to do in this world. Who says what's right and wrong? Without God, there is no answer to this. Without God, let us eat and drink, for tomorrow we die. And yet, most of us, Solomon included, have such a visceral aversion to some types of evil that even if we won't accept there's a God and he gets to tell us what to do, we also can't accept that the guy who likes torturing puppies for fun has exactly the same justification for his behavior as I have for doing a crossword puzzle for fun in the absence of God, because I like it. God has put eternity into man's heart. Deep down, we know that there's more to existence than this. Even if we can't explain it. Solomon has certainly failed to explain it. He even admitted it. And then he still said, but you should do what God says because... Let's wrap up by going back to chapter 3, verse 20. All go to one place. All are from the dust, and to dust all return. Who knows whether the spirit of man goes upward, and the spirit of the beast goes down into the earth? When Solomon wrote that, by God's providence, it was out of an enforced ignorance, because God hadn't revealed it to him or to anyone really yet. But since then, he's revealed Isaiah and Ezekiel and Haggai and Zechariah and Malachi and the entire New Testament, which answers his quandary. Solomon imagines that there's something more. He would like to think that the spirit of man and the spirit of the beast are two different things, even though he can't say exactly what it is, or how the death of man differs from the death of the animal. And he's right about it. And Jesus tells us about it, and he promises to bring us there to live with him forever. John chapter 14. In my Father's house are many rooms. If it were not so, would I have told you that I go to prepare a place for you? And if I go and prepare a place for you, I will come again, and will take you to myself, that where I am you may be also. And you know the way to where I am going. Thomas said to him, Lord, we do not know where you are going. How can we know the way? Jesus said to him, I am the way, and the truth, and the life. No one comes to the Father except through me. He's the answer to that innate human longing for eternity and for justice and for love. Here on this earth, there's plenty of practical advice from Solomon about life under the sun, but that doesn't go very far, and it doesn't prepare you for the spiritual world that transcends the grave. If you're ready for a glimpse of that eternal home, you've got to go through Jesus. And we'd love to help at River Ridge. Please get in touch with us. You can call or text us at 812-550-6234 or email us at info@riverridgechurch.org. You can also find us at 5600 Van Road in Newburgh. We gather at 9 a.m. every Sunday for Bible study, 10 a.m. and 4 p.m. for worship, and 7 p.m. on Wednesdays for another study. I'd love to see you there. Thanks for joining me today on Iron Sharpens Iron.